So here's a question that's probably crossed everyone's mind at some point. What happens after we die? I mean, it's one of the biggest mysteries out there, right? We've looked for answers everywhere in religion, philosophy, science. Well, today, we're going to dive deep into one really fascinating perspective on this whole thing. Just think about it for a second. What if this thing we're all sort of conditioned to fear? This idea of a final, absolute end. What if it's not an end at all? But really, it's just the start of a whole new journey, a kind of doorway from one state of being to another. Now, that's the core idea we're going to unpack right here. So, where are we getting this from? Well, our source for this whole exploration is a book from 1957 called What Becomes of the Soul After Death. It was written by a spiritual teacher named Swami Shivananda. We're basically going to break down the key ideas from his work and map out this really intricate spiritual science he describes. Okay, so first things first, the book starts by acknowledging something I think we can all relate to, that deep down fear and uncertainty that comes with thinking about death. Swami Shivananda doesn't just brush this off. He actually starts by saying, yeah, this is a real thing. He gets that this terror is a totally fundamental part of being human, especially when we're staring into a complete unknown. And that's really the whole point of his work. He's basically offering knowledge as the antidote to that fear. The idea is, if you can just understand the mechanics of death and what comes after, you can actually transform that terror into something more like a calm, informed perspective. All right, so let's get into the core idea of this whole philosophy. The book completely reframes what death is. It's not an ending, it's actually a necessary and totally natural part of a much, much bigger cycle. And the definition it gives is super simple, almost technical. Death is just a process. It's the moment the soul, the real essence of you, disconnects from the physical body it's been living in. That's it. Simple as that. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because it sets up two totally opposite ways of looking at things. On one side, you've got what's called the philosophy of the flesh. This is the idea that your body is you. Consciousness is just something your brain does, and when the body dies, game over. But on the other side, you've got the Vedantic view, and this says, nope, you are not your body. The body is just temporary. The soul, consciousness itself, is eternal, it's birthless, it's deathless. And here's a fantastic way to think about it. Imagine your body is just a set of clothes, right? When your favorite shirt gets old and worn out, you don't disappear. You just take it off and put on a new one. The text uses this really powerful analogy to make this whole idea of the soul moving to a new body feel, well, completely natural. Okay, so if the soul leaves the body, the big question is, where does it go? Well, according to this text, it's not random at all. The journey follows one of two very specific paths, and which path you take is all determined by the kind of life you lived. And this is so important. The soul doesn't travel light. Think of it like it's packing bags for the trip. It carries the essence of who you are, your mind, your senses, and all the impressions and momentum from your past actions. Your karma. Absolutely nothing gets left behind. So your destination really depends on your spiritual frequent flyer status, if you will. Let's look at the two options. First, you have Devyana, the path of light. This is for the real spiritual heavy hitters, the yogis and devotees who've achieved true knowledge. Their journey leads them to a state of ultimate unity called Brahmaloka, and from there, they don't come back. Then you have the other path, Pitrayana, the path of darkness. Now this is for good people who did charitable things but were still attached to getting rewards for them. They go to a pretty great place, a celestial world, but it's not permanent. Once the good karma points they've earned run out, they head back to Earth to start another cycle. And that, of course, brings us to the famous idea of reincarnation. It begs the question, right? According to this way of thinking, why do most of us end up coming back to the physical world? Well, let's think about a real-world puzzle for a second. How do you explain child prodigies? A kid who can just sit down and play the piano like a virtuoso with almost no lessons? Or a young genius who's already tackling complex math? Where does that come from? The text has an answer for that. It's called samskaras. You can think of these as deep-seated impressions, talents, and tendencies that the soul carries with it from one life to the next. It's almost like muscle memory, but for the soul. So in this view, a child prodigy isn't starting from zero. They're just picking up right where they left off in a past life. And this is a really important point. Rebirth here is not a punishment. Not at all. It's actually an opportunity. The text really drives home that no matter how much you might have messed up in one life, the cycle gives you endless chances to evolve, to learn, and eventually to find wisdom and redemption. Okay, so if most of us are caught on this big carousel of birth and death, is there a way to get off? Is there an exit? Well, yes, and the final part of the book is all about that, how to achieve the conquest of death. But let's be clear. Conquering death in this sense doesn't mean becoming physically immortal. It's not about living in this body forever. It's about achieving something way, way bigger, what's known as moksha, or total spiritual liberation. It means finally stepping off that wheel of reincarnation for good. So how do you actually do that? Well, the text lays out a really clear 5-step roadmap. Step 1, selfless service. That means doing things without expecting anything back. Then step 2 is dispassion, where you learn to detach from the outcomes of your actions. Step 3 is renunciation, letting go of all those worldly attachments. That leads to step 4, prayer and meditation, which is all about turning your focus inward. And finally, all of that leads to the ultimate goal, step 5, God realization, which is attaining direct knowledge of your true eternal self. And this quote just describes that state so perfectly. For a soul that's been liberated at the moment of death, there are no more desires pulling it back to earth. So its essence doesn't have to go anywhere. It just merges back into the universal consciousness. It's exactly like a single drop of water finally returning to the vast ocean. So when you boil it all down, the biggest takeaway from this entire philosophy is just how empowering it is. It's saying that your actions, your thoughts, your intentions, they're not just shaping this life. They're shaping your entire cosmic journey. You are literally in the driver's seat. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to chew on. If every single moment is a choice that creates ripples through eternity, what destiny are you creating for yourself right here, right now?